Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at DMA and we're going to look at section 6. Section 6 is slope and rate of change. If you recall, when we talk about slope, we used an equation called y equals mx plus b. If your equation is in this form, the m is the slope and the b is the y-intercept. So as you're working in this particular section of section 6, you're going to have a lot of questions asking you about the slope. What is the slope of a line? Well, with the slope, you might be given an equation. If I gave you, let's say, y equals negative 5x plus 2. If I asked you to identify the slope, what would the slope be? It would be the negative 5. The m is the value in front of the x. If I were to give you, let's say, 2x plus 10, y equals 7, and I asked you what is the slope of this line, the first thing you want to do is to rearrange it into that form. So you're going to have 10y equals, when the 2x moves to the other side of the equals, it's going to become minus 2x and bring down the plus 7. In order to get the y alone, we need to divide every term separately by 10. The 10s are going to cancel. Y equals a negative 2/10, if you simplify it, is a negative 1/5. And then we can't reduce, oh, don't forget the x, and we can't reduce the fraction 7/10. So for this equation, if I ask you what is the slope here is the negative 1/5. So if you're simply given an equation and you're asked to identify the slope, you look at the value that is in front of the x. If it's not in the correct order, you put it in the order mx plus b, and once you do, then you have your slope. When you're typing in answers, don't put the x with it. If you put the x with it, it'll mark it as being incorrect. Another thing that we've talked about with slope is when you have a positive slope goes upward. From left to right, it goes up. If you have a negative slope, your slope is going to go down. The other two slopes we talked about were if you have a horizontal line. A horizontal has a slope of 0. The equation is going to be y equals a number. So any y equals equation is always a horizontal line at the number for the y. You can type this one in on y equals and see the line on your calculator on the graph. However, if you have a vertical line has a slope, and we use the word undefined for this slope. The reason it's undefined would be because the denominator would be a 0, and we can never have 0 in a denominator, so that would make it undefined. The equation for a vertical line is always x equals a number. These you cannot put on a calculator because we don't have an x equals button, but whatever the number is, the x value is going to be that same number. Your y can be any value that you want it to be, but the x's are all the same. They're the same number that you have here, and these can be anything. Another thing that you will see is you might be asked about a roof pitch, the grade of a road, something of that nature. We can look at that as being rise over run. So rise is the distance that something goes up or down. Run would be left or right. So if I were to have this illustration, and let's say I had a rise of 6 feet, and let's say the run was 9 feet, if I'm calculating this, it would be 6 over 9. So I would get a roof pitch of 2/3. Not, yeah, 2/3. Or if they wanted a decimal, it would be a repeating decimal of 0.6 that would continue on and on. The most common way that we're going to work with finding the slope is to find the slope if you're given 2 points. So to find a slope, if given 2 points, this is going to be the formula we're going to use. The slope, you're going to do, in other words, it's 1. It means you're going to find the change in y values over the change in x values. And I'm just trying to write it in all the ways that I might say it so that it'll make sense. The formula that you're given is they want you to subtract the y's and they want you to subtract the x's. When you look at this on the book, they always put a 2 first, a 1 second. I usually put a 1 first, a 2 second. It honestly does not matter. The whole point is that, because I like to read left or right and not reverse things, so I put y1, y2, x1, x2. Notice that the x and y above each other are going to be from the same ordered pair. The x and y here are from the same ordered pair. So let me give you an example of some points, and we'll try it with this. So I'm going to give you the ordered pairs 4, 8, and 7 and 2. Let me just label this so you'll kind of have an idea what these are. This would be x1, y1. This would be x2, y2. I'm going to want you to see that whichever way you do it, you're going to get the same answer, whether it's the first or the second. So to find the slope here, I'm going to start with y. I'm going to do 8 minus 2. When I do my denominator and I go to the x's, since I started with this ordered pair first, for y, I have to start with this ordered pair first. So I have to do 4 minus 7. I can't flip-flop and put 7 minus 4 because then I'm changing the order. 8 minus 2 gives us 6. 4 minus 7 gives us -3. When I simplify 6 divided by 3, I get -2. Now I'm going to do the exact same problem, but in this case, I'm going to do it the way the book labels with y2, y1, and x2, x1. I just want you to see you're going to get the same answer. So if I start with the second ordered pair, I'm going to have 2 minus 8. And then starting with the 7, I would have 7 minus 4. 2 minus 8 is -6. 7 minus 4 is +3. And -6 divided by 3 is also -2. So as you see, we're getting the same answer for both of these. Both of these are giving me a -2 for my solution. Okay. So let's take another one. And I like to do some where we have a few negatives in it because it's the negatives that sometimes are the ones that'll catch us. So let me come up with some ordered pairs. So let's say we have -6, -2, and let's say we've got a -9, -4. Okay? So if I'm finding my slope, I'm going to start with my y's. So I'm going to do -2 minus -4. -2 minus -4. Then in the denominator, I have to start with the same ordered pair, -6 minus -9. Now, minus the negative becomes plus a positive. The common mistake is when people see the minus, They might have wrote -2 minus 4, but not put minus -4. If you'd like, when you use your calculator, just do -2 minus -4. It'll do all the work for you, and that is a +2. We have -6 minus -9. So -6 minus -9 would give us a +3. So for this particular one, our slope is going to be a +2/3. The next concept we need to talk about still in this section is what are parallel and perpendicular lines. Parallel lines have the same slope. Perpendicular lines So an example of parallel, they would look like this, two lines that never touch. Perpendicular lines cross at a 90-degree angle. So in other words, it's like an intersection where they intersect at 90 degrees. Now, it could still be turned away and be perpendicular because it's still at a 90 degrees. So if you're given problems and you're trying to calculate and figure out if they are perpendicular or parallel, if I have an equation and I have a slope of 2 and I have another equation and that slope is 2, those two particular. For perpendicular, the special rule for that, for perpendicular, you will be given a slope. And let me say I give you a slope of 2/3. Let's say that's the slope I give you. The perpendicular slope is going to be the opposite sign and the reciprocal of what you were given. So what I was given was a positive, so my perpendicular slope is going to be a negative. Since this is 2/3, if I wrote the reciprocal, that would be a 3/2. So the -3/2 would be the perpendicular slope to a given slope of 2/3. So if I give you y equals 5/6x plus 1 and y equals 5/6 minus 8, the slope of each of these is 5/6. When I look at those two slopes, they are the same, so they are parallel. If I give you y equals 7x plus 1, and I give you y equals -1/7 x plus 1, the slope is 7. The second slope is a -1/7. Now this technically is over 1. Isn't one positive, one negative? Aren't they reciprocals of each other? Those will be considered perpendicular. If I gave you y equals -2x plus 8 and y equals 3/4 x plus 1, this slope is -2, this slope is 3/4. They're not the same. They're not reciprocals and opposite of each other. These would just be considered neither because they don't meet either of those two criteria. And that is what we have going on within section 6. There's actually a good reference. If you look in your workbook on page 5-71, there's a really good summary of slope chart. That is something you may want to look at. It gives you everything that we've talked about sort of summed up in a nutshell there. Okay? So give me a second.